All right, now that we got this on there, something's wrong and we need to take it off. And that's not going to be fun. Actually, it's not too bad. And I'll show you exactly what I do. All right, so what you want to do is go ahead and get all your wires off, clean it up so you got a good workspace to work with. And you want to use a lot of this. This is some no clean flux. You can just, it doesn't have to be no clean, just be flux. Custer 186 is a really good flux I like to use. You want your soldering iron, same sort of tip as before. You want it to be a chisel tip, just big enough to get to each pad without touching two pads. Nice and clean solder tip. You're gonna want these tweezers for sure. Good set of tweezers, and of course cleaning brushes and solder wick. Definitely gonna need some solder wick. This is, I don't know what size it is, it doesn't really matter, but typically the smaller the better with this because these components are really small. All right, let's get to it. First thing we need to do is add flux. If your board has been in the drone for a while and it's all dirty, you want to go ahead and clean it off first with some alcohol. Add a bunch of flux right there. I'm going to add some flux on the inside. Lots of flux. And then a little bit on the back. All right. So, we'll take our soldering iron and our tweezers, and we're going to be extremely, extremely careful to only touch the solder pad or pin with the soldering iron right here. You do not want to wander off over here and touch some of these other components. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up this joint right here, and I'll grab it with the tweezers at the same time. And if you're lucky, you can get the whole pin pulled up, but that's not always the case. In fact, I'm starting to lose solder in that joint right there, so I'm gonna just add a little bit. Actually, this is, oh no, that's not the ground, okay. There we go, we're just gonna add a little bit of solder. That helps. All right, and then now, same thing, I'm just gonna heat it up, take the pin. Very, very gently. If it's not easy enough to pick up, then push it down. Get it wet, just push that pin down with the tweezers. All right, that one's down. I know it's gonna be hard, really hard to see from your view. In fact, it's really hard for me to see as well. It's much easier when you have a magnifying glass. I'm gonna add some solder to this joint. There we go. Very carefully and gently heat it up. Grab that pin, see if we can pull it out. If we can't pull it out, that's fine. Here we go. There we go, we got that one out. So that's good. That's just one less step that we have to do if we can get it out from here. It's not nearly as easy. But if you can, go ahead and pull it out. If not, there we go. Now this ground is gonna be very difficult. You could try, just don't overheat anything. Don't leave it on there too long. Most likely, you're not gonna get this ground out of there like this, but that's okay. We can just leave it for now. I'm gonna get this one warm, push it back down in there. There we go. All right, so all these are pushed down. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit more flux to these. And we're gonna do the same thing. Just kinda, I'm gonna try to pull them out. If they don't come out easily, That one came out. Don't force it. Don't leave your heat on there too long. But the more flux, the better is what I say. There we go. This is a ground right here, so I'm not going to worry about that one for now. We'll get it in a little bit. Go ahead and hit this one. It's going to be hard to grab. Just don't leave your heat on there too long because you can overheat it. All right, this one's a little bit difficult to pull out, so I'm just going to push it down. I'm going to heat it up. That joint wet. Very gently push down. Do not force it because you can break a pad, pull a pad off real easily. All right, there it goes. And then this is the last one. This one should be fairly simple. Yeah, you can see how loose it is already. There we go. All right. So now we got those out. Push down, except for the grounds. Those are still in there. We'll flip the board over. Now we've got those pins there. We could just do the same thing. Add some flux. Probably want to go ahead, just to be safe, add a little bit of extra flux on this side since we burned most of it off. And just put some right there. And so, with the clean tip, we can grab these much easier because they're sticking out a whole lot further. All right, don't force it. Let it come with you. It's better. You can heat this side of the board up a little bit more. And if it doesn't want to come, let's see. Yeah. Yeah, see what's happening is there's not enough solder in it to pull it out, to go all the way through the pin. There we go, that one worked. And then there's this one, yeah. Let's see if we can get this one. This is that ground pin. You don't always get the ground pin, but that's fine. You don't have to get it right now. All right. Oh, that's that ground pin, that's right. I think we got all the rest of them. Just need to, that's the ground, so we just need to get this one out. And in order to get that out, we'll flip it back over. You know, it's this 5-volt pin right here, so just gonna add a little bit of solder to it. There we go. Add enough to where it's not sinking down anymore into the little hole. And then we'll just grab it. Same thing. Should be a little easier to pull out this time. My tweezers have some debris on it. There we go. Now we got it out. All right, so now all that's left are the 2 ground pins, this one in the middle and this one right here. The rest of this stuff are all clean and out. So for those, we'll flip it back over. Add more flux, of course. Lots of flux. And then now, what I'm going to do is just to make sure it's all you know what we need to do is this. We need to start getting all this solder out of those, because if you see, they're still going to be bridged underneath. It's still connected to the board, just without a pin. And you don't want to start ripping this off because you're going to tear all those pads up. So what we need to do is take some of the solder braid, and we're going to start sucking the solder out of these holes. Always good to add some flux to the braid. That will make sure it gets as much solder in there as possible. With a clean tip, and you can add a little bit of solder onto the tip too. It'll help prime everything. And then we can start cleaning. See if we can get as much of this solder out of here as possible. There we go. See, sucks it out of those holes. Good job. There we go. All right, this side's getting saturated. I'm gonna flip to the other side. All right, you wanna make sure also that your braid doesn't touch any of these other components, because it gets just as hot as this tip, pretty much. And it could desolder those components without even you touching them with the solder tip. So just be sure that this braid, and that's why I was saying earlier, you want the smallest possible braid. Make sure this braid isn't touching anything it's not supposed to. Yeah, there we go. Get some of that out of there. Nice. All right. Got that. See if we can get some of. You can cut this braid at an angle too. That makes it a little smaller. There we go. All right, now we got a little bit left in this hole right here. So let me get a fresh piece of braid. Add some flux. And get back at it. There we go, you can see it get on in there. Nice. All right. Now we pretty much got them all. Most of the solder out. Looks like there's a little bit left in this one right here. I'm gonna cut this braid, because I need to get in that one right there. Let's add some flux. Here we go. All right, I think that's pretty good. You can see, you can try to. Yeah, there we go. I think we got most of that. Now let's suck them out from this side. Now it's very important to do this first before you start trying to rip those, that VTX and that receiver off the board. Because if you don't do this, you're going to tear some pads, and then they will be ruined. So go ahead and try to just take your time one at a time. Just always remember not to overheat it though. That's a big problem. Leaving your soldering iron on there too much or having too hot of a soldering iron. This braid is pretty much saturated at this point. You don't want it getting too much solder on it like that, or else it'll start sticking to the board. There we go. Now we're pulling all that out of there. It's time consuming, but it's rewarding when you get it done. Let's get a fresh piece of braid. Add some more flux to the braid. And then we can just go and make sure all these are fairly well. Need to clean my brush. Yeah. I don't know if you can see that, but you can clearly see through the hole that it's not connected anymore. If you have stubborn one like this one right here, this one just doesn't want to heat up. You can add, sounds counterintuitive, but you can add a little bit of solder to it, like that. And then of course, flux. And if we can get it. There we go. Starting to get it out of there now. Iron's getting cold or getting dirty. Clean it off. You can see I'm not getting much bubble action going. That means that the flux is drying up or burning off. Either that or my iron is cold. There we go, we're getting it out of there now. Yeah. Alright. Still not satisfied with this one right here. Feels like still got some solder in it. So what I do is I heat it up a little bit, bring that solder up to the top. There we go. All that bubble action, that's good right there. Okay, those are all good. All those are good. Seems like this one still has. Now, it may look like I'm pressing down really hard in the video, but I'm not. I'm just pressing just enough to give it some heat. If you start scraping this against these pads, you're going to start tearing these pads up. All right, let's try that. Now we're going to flip this back over to this side. Guess what? Add flux. all over. Now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna grab this right here, and I'm gonna start heating up this ground pad, which should be the only thing left touching it or holding it to the board. Just very gently, use tweezers as the ground's heated up. The ground can take more heat than the rest of the pads, so it's just kind of gently pry up. If it's not coming up very easily, then you've got one of these still bridged underneath. So I'm just gonna gently, as I heat each up, just pry just a little bit. All right, that should be good, hopefully. There we go. Starting to come up. Sorry if my hand's probably all in the way. This one's wanting to fight back, but that's fine. I like a challenge. See if we can get it hot, maybe pull this pin. Yeah, it's not wanting to go. Sorry, let's add solder. See how it's sucking in there? Now it's not sucking in there anymore. That's good. Get it nice and hot. There we go, get that pin out. All right, so now that the pin's out, we can use a solder braid to go ahead and get the rest of that solder out of there. Watch these components right next to that ground pin because they are very small and they are right next to this ground pin. Don't want to pull those up because then you're not going to be happy. All right, here we go. Suck a little bit of that out of there. So we should now at this point grab this. It's okay to add solder to a joint that you're working on. It's good, because that means it's going to flow all through the joint, keep everything nice and hot. Now, if it's not coming up, like this one's having a little bit of issue coming up, that means that one of these pads is still bridged underneath, which is fine. What we're gonna do, same things as before, just kind of work your way pad to pad, heat them up. As you're prying just a little bit. Honestly, of course, for the video, I've never had one this stubborn, but this is probably worst case scenario, so that's good. Usually, if you get everything just right, here we go, then you won't have any issues. All right, there we go. See, that's what was going on. There's a lot of solder under that, which is fine. That's good. Now let's just get these just away from that one. Set that aside. And then we'll work on VTX. Now that we've got that off, we can look and see what needs to be. You can almost look in there. Let's see if I can figure out how to make this light up. But you can look inside here to see which one of these is still bridged. And it looks like this one, and of course the ground. The others are fine. So what we're going to do, add plenty of flux. Here, I got a braid right here. And since I know it's right under here, I'm just going to keep this flat. There we go. That's going to suck all that up. Now this is what I was saying earlier. All that solder on there is starting to stick. So I gotta get really high in order to get that off. That's okay. You can also easily just cut it off if you need to. And I think this one, yeah. There we go. There we go. All right, now let's take a look. We got this one taken care of. This is that one that was giving some issues earlier. Right there, but that's okay. Just keep working at it, making sure not to make the board too hot. I'm gonna add just a little bit of solder. Like that, and that will help me. It will help suck all of that solder out of that hole, because now it's all kind of connected. And it looks really nasty and dirty right now, but here in just a little bit, it'll look so clean, it looks brand new. There we go. All right, so I think that pretty much did it. Let's see what happens. So I'm gonna grab this right here. Try not to get onto like a component. I just need a good solid grip. Yeah. Here we go. All right. Now, this is the ground, so it's going to take a little bit extra heat to get that up. So, pull it a little bit. Just work it very slowly. Looks like I'm coming off my... You could put a standoff or something on this to keep it down if you really want to. Yeah, this one's the one that's giving me trouble. Notice I only keep my iron on there for a little, unless I'm touching the ground, I only keep my iron on there for just a little bit. Now take it off and let it cool. clean tip. Now, as this tip gets older, I'm going to need a little bit more heat, because it'll start to wear out. I wonder if I can pull the pin. Let's see if we can get the pin. Yeah, it's really, there's a lot of heat dissipating through this VTX, so it makes it a little bit more difficult. All right, let's go back to this. There we go. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Clean the tip. I can tell my tip is getting a little cooler than it should be. Alright, let this heat up. Just very gently kind of work it. And eventually, there we go. There. So all the pads are still intact. Good. It's very hot, by the way. All right, we'll let those cool. While that's cooling, what we can do now, we can take this pin out and we can start cleaning up these joints. Let's get a bigger piece of braid. There's plenty of flux on here, but I'm gonna just add a little bit of fresh because I like lots of flux. Makes everything way easier. And then you just kind of want to work yourself. I like to work from the outside back like this. There we go. Man, that's just something about the smell of that flux. Should probably, normally I would have my fume extractor on with a carbon filter, but it's not necessarily loud, but it's just kind of not great for video. And these fumes are just all in my face, which is awesome. All right, and just for funsies, go ahead and clean these joints as well. All right, now I just like to kind of, because it'll probably, just for beauty sakes, just clean them up a little bit. Okay. Flip it over, same thing on this side. That piece is completely saturated, so we'll get a new piece. And same thing. Just get them nice and clean, because you're gonna want these, not so much because you're just going to solder wire to these, but these you're going to put pins back in. So in order to put the pin in, you're going to need to get as much solder out of it as possible, or else the pin's not going to want to go in very easily. You'd have to heat it up, and then it's just a little bit more of an issue. So if you just get it out of the way, go ahead and clean it up. Nice and neat. Then it'll basically be like brand new. All right. These are looking good. And by now, set that to the side. These have cooled off enough, very cool to the touch. I'm gonna get a little bit of this blue tack like that, just to stick this down on here. Because what we need to do now is we need to clean, same thing, we just need to clean these off because pins are going to go in them later. Now if you're not going to put a pin in it or put it back on a proton board or something like that, if you're just going to solder a wire to it, you don't necessarily have to clean these off, but I like to just go ahead and get everything clean while my iron's hot, the flux is out, all that fun stuff. Clean that tip off. All right. So we'll let that cool, and then while that is cooling off, we'll get the proton board. It's all gross right now, but we can clean that real easily. Flux remover. Get a good healthy dose of that on there. Take your tweezers and just kind of lightly find all those real thick spots. Like those are thick. And then you take your brush, cleaning brush, a little alcohol. And of course, you probably know how to do this already. Just get it nice and clean. You don't want to use a toothbrush. You don't want to use something with nylon bristles because they generate a lot of static. Now with this board, it's not that big a deal because you don't have any components on this board. But if you're if you're cleaning the VTX or the receiver or some other flight controller or something like that, you can generate a good amount of static, electricity, just by rubbing your nylon bristles all over the board. This has a metal handle. It has, I don't know what these are, but they're not nylon. I do know that. And so they will not generate nearly as much static. All right, so we got that. You want to inspect with a magnifying glass, something like this, and make sure everything, you can see right here, I don't know if you can see it in the video, yeah, you kind of, there's some solder mask removed from these pads. That's fine. This is the same pad. They're going to the same thing anyway, so that's not that big a deal. If the solder mask is removed, whenever it generally comes from whenever you're trying to use the solder braid and you're rubbing it on it, it'll rub that solder mask right off. So that's why you have to be very, careful not to. However, it's not that big a deal for this board because this is just, traces underneath the solder mask is really all this is. So that's fine. It's gonna be perfectly useful or good to use later. All right, so the board's clean. These have cooled off. So it's just the same thing. Just clean these same way. I don't need this anymore probably. So that's pretty much it. You've got all fresh components now. All you got to do is put the pins in and put it all back together. Hope this was useful. It's kind of long, probably fast forwarded through a bunch because it's so long. But this is a tedious process depinning these things and getting this however you need it. But if you just take your time, you will have you'll get it done the right way, and you can put it all back together and it'll all work. All right, appreciate it.